even when we'd done Billy Elliot here, we went and did it on I mean, then we did it in Australia, and then we did it on Broadway. And each time we did it, we would change it and trying to make it better. And on Broadway, the theatres on Broadway are kind of, instead of being like a box where the stage is right in front of you, so it's like straight on, they're sort of scallop shaped, and there are these weird boxes that hang over the stage, but they really look out onto the audience rather than down onto the stage. It's really weird. And they don't sell those seats because they're really terrible, because you can't really see the stage. But I used to go and wait till the lights went down and go into these little boxes and peep over and watch the audience. I wouldn't watch the show, I'd watch the audience. Right. And it was kind of like, it was like a dance, because you could see where they got bored, because they all went, oh, and then they cross their legs, and then and then they go like this when they, and it was like a dance, and so I'd write down where they were doing these things and working out how to nip the scenes and make it sort of quicker and better, and then you could, so it was like an experiment, and you'd make these cuts, and then the next night I'd go and have another look, and lo and behold, they didn't lie back, and they weren't. And so I think you're right that you get an amazing response. I mean, firstly, as a writer with the performers who are in the rehearsal room, but then if you're attentive to the audience, you learn an awful lot about what you've written, and I think there are two different types of writers. There's people who are writing to just say what they want to say, and nobody should touch that, and this is it. And I think that's a legitimate thing, but I don't. That's not for me. I'm much more interested in trying to make an audience, move them, or give them pleasure, or make them think about things, and so it feels like much more of a dance between me and them. And so I'm very attentive to, if I can learn something from how they're receiving it, and make different choices in the play. I really want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, you can feel it. I mean, there's often like things happen within your writing. It's not like candy floss, like just fluff, there's actually depth and kind of like proper story going on in whatever you've written, and I love like a British film like Kes, Full Monty, what's Billy Elliot again the other day, even just stuff about kind of like art history of everything that's happened. Like I watched Legend the other day, and it's like just those things. And there is something beautiful about the kind of British film where the light is captured. There's often that thing of like, oh, we're in England, London, and it's raining, and it's that classic thing, like, oh, whatever. But your films have kind of like a lightness, but then a depth, and it does make you think at the same time. And there's that thing where your films are kind of like on the silver screen and they've been watched around the globe, but they have like a grounded, earthy, real kind of grittiness about them, which is really enjoyable. And people often grow. There's like, sometimes there's loss happening in there. There's change happening within it. And I think, Lee's done it again, where it's not just a little surface storyline. It's actually about something. And you think about what you've written for like days afterwards. Is that just something that flows out of you, or you're not deliberately going, I'm going to make them think now? You're just like thinking.
I don't think it meant necessarily in the moment, but I guess that, like you, I was really inspired by things like Kes, and a lot of things that I saw on the TV in the 70s and early 80s when I was growing up, and I think I was naturally attracted to stories that were kind of recognized that they were like real life rather than I always remember like watching those old Hollywood movies from the 40s and things, and they'd go into a room and it was like a massive studio or something. This was their bedroom in a hotel. It's like, this is like as big as the hotel. It wasn't realistic at all. Whereas I was always attracted to seeing what, as you say, that quality of light in a real house or in a real street, and thinking, oh my, that's very evocative and made me feel something. But also, I think I've always been attracted to things that made me laugh and things that made me feel sad. And I think that there's a lot of sadness in a lot of the stories that I write, and I think that's a good thing, because I think it's a good thing to share and not to be scared of. And I think it's one of the reasons people like art, is it makes them remember and feel things. You're sad because it's something important, whether you're sad for yourself or whether you're sad because you've lost something. And I think it's that thing of the old Roman masks that symbolize theatre. There's one is laughing and one is crying. You know, it is that, and if I can, I love to put the laughter and tears back to back, and because you get such a switchback if you're laughing and then suddenly you get something like a hit in the solar plexus, and that's one of the things I love about the films and plays and poems and books and pieces of music that really affect me, are ones that really make your body feel something and not just your mind. Do you know what I mean? They affect your emotion, because there's something very, very objective about an audience which is laughing. That it's like you can't. They're not pretending to laugh. They're laughing.
Yes.
You know, it's kind of something which is involuntary. It's something, a physical response to something. And also when people get upset, it's a physical. You get a physical response. It's not just, you might know it's sad, but it's not affecting you until your body reacts, and that's something weird that theatre and art and music can do. I mean, it is like magic. I don't know why showing things to people would make them feel this, but it does. And that's why it's really powerful, and that's why some performers and some writers and some musicians can do this. They've got this thing, and they just move you, and being moved I think it's a bit like a drug. I just kind of I want more of that. And want to create more of that, and if a performer's doing that, I want to keep them doing that.
Thank you so much for watching and listening. However you're consuming this podcast, please consider subscribing, liking, and leaving us a 5-star review, as this helps us to reach a wider audience. Your support is very much appreciated. Now back to the show. How many years now have you been writing professionally?
I guess I think it's probably about 30 years. Then I've been a professional writer, but I guess for 10 years before that I was always loved theatre, and doing it in the youth theatre at school or at university and these things. So it's a long time now. It's almost 40 years since I've been sort of thinking about this every day. Now
it always has been part of you, but that is what you do. And do you completely, I mean, I know you're saying you're always tweaking and moving stuff around depending on what kind of reactions do you get, but do you trust what you've written? Like when you're handing it over to somebody to read, or like an editor or something like that, or a producer or something, are you handing it over with no excuses? You're like, yep, this is it. This is what I've written. Like it.
I would hate to hand something over, and sometimes you've got to, because of the time scale of things, if I'm not happy with it. However, inevitably they will see something in it that you haven't and say, oh, you could make more of this, or this bit's not as good as this other bit, and then you go, oh yeah, I wish because you don't, it's sort of, you need feedback to understand where you've gone wrong. And I guess it's like, that's why there are directors for actors, that there's no reason, and loads of plays you don't need a director, a group of actors can come together and make something, but it's easier if you've got somebody standing outside giving you feedback. And so that's what happens firstly with a director, sometimes with a producer. The producers aren't usually as helpful as directors because they have a different set of criteria, and they're thinking about different things. And if you're actually making something collaboratively, the internecine details, it's really the director and then the performers, but also designers, lighting, sound, all of these people have lots, a huge input because they're hugely experienced about making shows and theatre. So I very few plays really, by the time they're on the stage, are just written by one person, but they're created by a group of people working together and feeding back off each other. And the more I know about really famous writers and read their letters about rehearsal, as Tennessee Williams or various different people, you see that this process is a universal one, and it's how I think people have made plays always, from Shakespeare to Sophocles or August Wilson or whoever. You make it in a group of you make it with a group of collaborators, and it's really it's a very unusual place to make something so intimately with another group of people.
Yeah, and I guess as long as everybody's there for the betterment of the piece, then that's really good, isn't it? You've got to be open, not too sensitive to feedback, collaborative, like you said, so that you're not precious about anything that somebody else might want to remove or change or anything like that. Have you had any experiences where you've written something, whether it's for a screenplay or it's written for a play or a musical, where someone's like, oh, I'm not really a fan of that bit, and then you've gone, oh, but I really like it, and like, how have you ever had that experience, and how do you resolve those differences?
I think it almost happens on everything. Sometimes it's a big thing, but I think most of the time, I think especially when I was younger, I think that I really had to fight to defend changes or cuts and things, because I think that I was untested, but I had a strong feeling about a lot of things. Sometimes I'd win them and sometimes I wouldn't. And I'm not saying I was always completely right, but I think I understood what I was writing perhaps more than the people who didn't quite get what I was getting at. But it's always a delicate thing because what I've learnt is that what you think is obvious on a piece of paper when I write it is not necessarily obvious to other people at all, because you're coming from a really specific perspective. And also I live with the characters and the words for an awful long time, and then other people are coming and picking it up and having an instant response, and quite often their instant response is really helpful. because you suddenly say, oh, if somebody else is not expecting this, I might need to put a little bit more in, or actually that's far too much. They've got it already. But then there are certain things where people kind of don't get it. And you go, no, this is good. Honestly, if you keep doing this, this will work. This is gold dust. And they go, I want to change it. But I think, especially performers have a lot of nerves, and they have a lot of anxiety about different things, and that can sometimes get in the way. But I think that's why directors are very important in the mix of taking a new piece of writing to the opening night, is because you need to negotiate all of these very complex things. Somebody might be at the end of their career and kind of, finding their faculties waning, and so they're anxious about that. Other people have just gone off a terrible job where it was a disaster, and they want to prove themselves in different ways. All of that is actually the energy and material of a play or a musical that you have to kind of mold, as well as the words, as well as the characters, as well as the songs. And all of those things are important. And that's where directors are rather brilliant at actually understanding it's not just something pure. It's something where all of these forces need to come together to make this amazing thing. And if you can, and that's when everybody you can use your hurt and your loss and your adversity to make something beautiful out of it. If we all come together in that way, but people have got to feel safe, and you've got to look after everybody for that to happen, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when, film sets are crazy, and pressure and time and money and all of that stuff. And then with theatre, you'll just become a little family, don't you? You're together all the time in rehearsals, and then throughout the whole run and all of that stuff. It can become a microcosm, It's trying to find that balance of personality and energy, and knowing when to leave people alone, knowing when to suggest things and when to just leave it a little bit later. And it's very interesting, isn't it? And also, I guess, having to manage, sometimes ego as well, or people, like you were saying, people not understanding certain things. I know I've played parts when I was Celia in The Colour Purple. There was one scene where there were like 4 or 5 takes that I could have gone with this character. And I was like, yes, because she's behaving like that because of this, or is it because of that, or is it because of what somebody said in, the first act, or there's so many places you can go with it. And that's where, like you said, a great director will come in and let you try stuff out, and go, oh yeah, well, was Alice Walker thinking this? Was Lee Hall thinking this? Or will Lee be surprised that we've gone this way? And it's that openness, and like we said before about being collaborative. And I think there's a degree of just being intelligent about it, and being slow and slowing things down, and going, my first kind of like inkling on this line may not be the one that we end up going with. What else can I discover and get a bit more depth out of this? Are you thinking that with writing as well?
I think it's very similar to what you've just described about how you might approach a scene or a character, that you quite often you have an instant response, but you need to sort of you need to try out, even if that you discover the instant response was the right one. But quite often you find something else. And sometimes I write a scene and I think, I've done the scene. And then I often go back and go, what would happen if I just carried on the scene? And then I carry on the scene, and I find the characters saying something really quite important that I'd not thought of. And it's sort of like, it's almost like a thought experiment. What happens if I go on? And quite a lot of really good bits of scenes, and then sometimes I cut out the whole front half of the scene and keep the bit that I would have never written. But it is that thing. It's sort of like it's like I have a rehearsal room in my mind at all times, and I'm saying, oh well, what if he doesn't come in? If he comes through there and says this, what would happen then? And I go, oh, he'll say that, and then they'll say that. So it is like a big sort of a mental experiment with all these characters walking around your mind, but they sort of speak quite often. They speak out of turn, and sometimes that's the best bits. In rehearsal rooms, sometimes you stumble across things almost by accident, but they work much better than what you'd intended to do sometimes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like just like being free and not listening to, oh, I've got to kiss somebody now, or I've got to be vulnerable now. You know, with that little mind, like that little voice in your head, you're like, it's not you. You know.
Yeah.
It's so. I always say this. I'm like, it's so interesting. Of course, it's interesting.
Just as an actor does, they have to know their lines. You know, unless how it would all fall apart. And so you have a rational sense of what you've got to do, but that's never going to be good acting, because you've got to take that as read, but you've got to access something much more mysterious about your emotions and your soul, and bearing your soul, and it's a dance between these two things. And as you say, you have to be very intelligent about it, because you have to have worked out a lot of rational things, but be smart enough to know to give yourself the other bit of you, which is your unconscious self and your emotional self, and allow that in, because that's really this combination of these two things that's going to make it move people or come alive, isn't it?
The self-editing and the carrying on the scene, was that something you always did, or has that kind of come into your work as you've gotten better with the writing, or as the years have gone on? Like, are you just quicker now, like with getting things onto the page, because you're just better writer than you were before?
Not really. I think, I mean, if anything, it's harder. You're sort of more used to it, but so I can sit down and write a scene, but to write a good scene is just as hard as it ever was, or harder, because I think you know a lot of it relies on these weird accidents and these things popping out of nowhere, and it can be quite. Well, I suppose it's like musicians. Like, if you think about like really famous, I won't name them, but musicians who between 1970 and 1974 did these amazing albums, and then they're still writing stuff now, but they're still writing very similar stuff because that's their style, but it's not as. There's something not as rich or as immediate as that, and I think that's the same for writing. You know, that you go through these purple patches where things all come together, but in writing you often have a very long career if you're lucky. And so you're kind of expected to do the same when you're 60 as when you were 30.
But you've got all the extra 30 years of life experience, haven't you, that you can throw in there. And do you know what? With that experience, is anything that you write kind of a bit autobiographical? Because your characters often have like an otherness kind of about them. You know, Billy Elliot was dancing when he was expected to go down a mine, and then the Pitman painters, it was like, they're down a mine, you're not supposed to be painting, you know, you're not supposed to be doing that. And then like with Spoonface, it's that poor little girl having cancer and she's autistic but amazing with numbers, you know, and you're thinking, it's like, how do the things go together? Have you kind of ever been othered, apart from being, you know, a writer from the Northeast? And is there a bit of yourself in everything that you write?
I think there is. I think they're all kind of they're all sort of fantasy autobiographies. It's me looking out but dressed as somebody else, if you see what I mean. Obviously, well, not obviously, but actually, I can't dance very well at all. So, so,
I bet you're amazing,
so,
really.
oh yeah. But Billy Elliot was a bit of a fantasy autobiography in that, his dancing was my writing, and and the arguments I had, that Billy has with his dad, were kind of ones I had with my dad about, why are you doing this? This is ridiculous, and the story of the dad, because Billy Elliot doesn't really change. He likes dancing and he carries on dancing.
Yeah, he does.
But the people around him, he forces them to change. His dad changes his mind quite dramatically, and that's and a lot of people find that a moving part of the story. And I think that's what happened with my dad, that he kind of realized, he should be doing this theatre stuff, this writing stuff. It's what ultimately I would have wanted for him, because he's happy and it makes other people happy, and this is a good thing. But I think he was trying to protect me from it earlier on because he didn't understand it. But I think. Listen, I mean, my life's been really easy because people have just helped me all the time, and I might have come from, an inauspicious place to start wanting to be a writer, but very quickly, people just helped, and so I've never felt othered in that sense. But I think everybody feels an outsider. In one way or another, and it might be very profound things about your social context or your psychological makeup, but I think everybody knows what it's like to not quite belong, in whether it's in your family or in your neighborhood. There's always something, and even the most popular people, if you talk to them, have some anxiety about something, and you think, how could they have thought that? They're so brilliant, and they're so clever and outgoing and everything. But inside of you, there's a vulnerability, whoever you are, I think, and so I guess that's the bit that I'm interested in all of the characters. Is it what bit, what can I explore that in that character that will allow other people to empathize and understand something about their situation, because I think that we are all vulnerable in different ways, and I think that writing plays and films is kind of like, I call it sort of like an empathy machine. And I think so much about our politics and our culture and things about so divisive, and others, lots of groups and individuals within it. And I kind of see writing these dramas is a way of allowing people to empathize in a way that maybe politically that they don't, because they don't like this group of people or that thing, but almost forcing them through their emotions to identify with other people, and that's the kind of the political use of writing and drama, and that I think I feel is a very important part of it for me. A very motivating thing for me to explore those things.
That's, oh gosh, Lee. Oh, this is a very good podcast. We're going to edit that bit out, but it is. No, we keep it in. It's so brilliant. Do you have anything on the back burner aside from the massive film that you're researching? But is there anything else kind of on the back burner that you've got kind of like in the pipeline that we can look forward to? or anything like you've written like ages ago that hasn't been produced. That like,
Yeah, I'm thinking. I think the thing is that why I'm struggling to answer the question is I've got so much, because I think of the last 10 years, I've written maybe 10, 11 things that, for various reasons, haven't got made. I wrote a musical with Paul McCartney of the film It's a Wonderful Life, and for legal reasons to do with the copyright, that got stopped. I wrote a film about Fred Astaire and his sister, who was an excellent dancer, for Tom Holland, and that got thwarted. I've written lots of things. I wrote a whole film about Ozzy Osbourne and Sharon Osbourne, and I went to visit them in LA, and so these things may happen at some point. They may happen with somebody else writing on top of my work. I don't know. So there's loads of different things that are all kind of. By the time you've done it for 30 years, there's a big pile of things which might happen sometime, but may not happen at all. So, but I kind of now I just try to focus on whatever the thing is in front of me, and so the opera I wrote during lockdown 5 years ago with a composer, and I'd be on Zoom and he'd be in his studio, and we did this thing, and then 5 years later it happened, and the Mother Courage that I've just done, although I kind of adapted it a bit for this company I was explaining about, that I wrote that 25 years ago, and I really, for a very specific group of people, for shared experience, and for an actor that I really love. And I thought that was an absolute one-off, but then suddenly 25 years later, another group of people are doing it. So you never quite know what's of the old work, what's going to happen. And then somebody might come along. A Chinese producer rang me up this morning and said, I've got this idea for a show in China. And these very unexpected things happen, and you just have to kind of, respond. And I think that's one of the things about, which you'll know about the theatre, is that anything can happen anytime. And you just have to be flexible enough to sort of catch on to things, and it's a very it's a hard life to you can't really plan very much, because you don't really know what will happen, and it's the same same for performers, and it's the same for writers really, and things that you think are going to happen fall through because of it's so complicated to get all of the performers and the money, and if it's a film, all of the other things together, or even sometimes I've had musicals which are ready to go, but then you can't find the right theatre to put them in, and that often happens, and so then you lose a performer who's crucial to the thing, and then you have to wait another year before everybody's ready. It takes so many things to come together to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, but in the meantime, you're still writing. I mean, you're so prolific. You said that you've written, between 10 and 11 things in the last 10 years, which means that's kind of like, a piece and a bit every year, isn't it? Like every year you're churning out something complete. That's massive. That's so much work.
Yeah, but I think it is what I do. It's all that I do.
Yeah, but still, no. But the thing is, you're churning it out, but it's the quality of it. I mean, Paul McCartney wouldn't be just working with anyone, right? And if it was rubbishly, he definitely wouldn't have been there, like Tom Holland. Just churning out whatever. So to stay right up there at the top of your game. And the thing is, people are calling you. You're getting calls this morning to say, hey, I want to put something on, because you're still out there and you're maintaining the quality and the standard of everything, Lee. It's just brilliant. I mean, Darren, my husband, who's sitting over there, he was like, you got to get Lee to do the podcast. You got to get Lee to do the podcast. Misha, have you called Lee yet? Lee? And I was like, oh, I'm doing it. Because when we worked together, I would come home and be like, Lee's really nice. He's really good. Like, I'm feeling what he's written. Because some things you write, like you read it as an actor, you think, cool, what's this? I'm really going to have to do my best with this. You know, just like pretend that it's brilliant. But like, I was coming home like just gushing, like going, Darren, it's amazing. I'm having such a good time. Lee's amazing. You know, and you're so giving and open. And like I said, when you read my work, I was like, wow. Not everybody would do that, you know. You are a like just special kind of person, because that was during your lunch break when you gave me my feedback, and it's just so lovely and kind, and that open, collaborative, just generous, giving nature comes through in your work. It really, really does. You're entertaining people, you're making people laugh and cry and think, you know, and think about themselves and what changes they can make within themselves through your words, Lee. And that's massive. I mean, you're going to be modest about it, but like, you need to realise what you've done to people. And what you continue doing.
Well, that's very kind. I just do what I don't know. I just do. I think the thing is, when you're creative, as you know, you just do what you know, and I mean, and you are such a giving performer. I mean, as a person, you're also so kind and so thoughtful and all of that. But on stage, you have the gift of doing that in the moment in a very profound way that really completely blew my head off when we worked together. But I think it's because it's one of the great pleasures of doing what we do is being able to give something to other people. I mean, that's essentially what we're all doing. We're trying to give something from our lives, about our lives and how we feel about the world, and share it. And I think that the only thing I've learned watching lots of more brilliant people than me is that you kind of have to be yourself, and you shortcut yourself by trying to be something else. You know, and everybody writes differently and everybody performs differently, and you don't want somebody who's going to perform just identical to somebody else. That's a kind of mimic. What you want is somebody who's uniquely themselves and not like everybody else. That's what makes every performer really brilliant. Or the difference between a moderately good performer and a brilliant performer is that nobody else could do what they do. They may do the same part, but they sing that song or they deliver that line in a unique way. And I think it's the same with writing, that you know, I think I mean I love all sorts of writers, and probably those writers which are nothing like what I do, but they're uniquely what they do. And I suppose the other thing that I do a lot of it is adapt other people's work, or take a film and make it into theatre, and it's sort of, sometimes I do it like Bertolt Brecht. I mean, he's been dead a long time, but it's like doing it with a friend. You're kind of having a conversation with something that they did maybe in another language, maybe 100 years ago, you know, and you're, but it's this, I'm often inspired by somebody else, living or dead, to make something myself, you know, to find something to say that I didn't know was in my little noggin.
there you go. And you've inspired loads of people. Just Googling your name, the number of people who are just using your work just for auditions, for just putting a monologue on the internet, different versions of your pieces. It's incredible. And your legacy is going to live on and on and on and on. And when you and I are long gone, Lee, people will still be saying your words. That must feel so good. That must feel amazing, right? In like 100 years' time, they'll written by Lee Hall. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast. I'm elated. Darren's even more elated than I am. He's going like that behind the camera.
Well, it was so fun and really interesting to have this conversation, because I don't really often think about these things. You know, I'm just kind of plodding along on my own. But thank you so much. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you. And I'll let you get back to it. And best of luck with the rest of the run of the play as well.
Thank you.
With Mother Courage. And I look forward to the film coming out. Well, another one of the 10 or 11 films that you've got coming out. Let me know. We'll be at the cinema.
Oh, well, lovely to speak to you.
And you,
and good luck with everything. See you soon.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.